How's it going, Sports Checkdown fans? And as you may have noticed, some big trade really happened, and it happened in the NFL. And the big trade involves DeAndre Hopkins and David Johnson. DeAndre Hopkins was a receiver for the Texans, and he's made a Pro Bowl for the last 6 years of his career. I'm not sure, but he's been an All-Pro. He's been spectacular, and whenever you ask any corner or player about the top wide receivers, it's always going to be Michael Thomas, Julio Jones, and DeAndre Hopkins. They're always mentioned in that conversation, and DeAndre Hopkins was traded today. First thing I think about is who did he get traded to, and it was the Arizona Cardinals. And I made a video about this earlier about how no one's talking about the Arizona Cardinals, and they had a sneaky good year last year. And now they just added DeAndre Hopkins, one of the best wide receivers in the whole National Football League. And this just gives Kyler Murray weapons, and Kyler Murray was already playing spectacular last year, but he could have improved. And now this would be major improvement, as he may not have much offensive line help, but that could be fixed through the draft. But now they added DeAndre Hopkins, and that's going to make Kyler Murray's life a lot easier, as his best receiver last year, I want to say either Christian Kirk or Larry Fitzgerald. I mean, numbers do lie sometimes, but I think from the eye test, you could totally tell it was one of those two. And they were playing good, but nothing like a number one should, because Larry Fitzgerald is kind of a little old. Not a little, he's very old for a wide receiver, but he's still putting up respectable numbers, especially at his age. And he's a Cardinals icon, so you can't ever let him go. And Christian Kirk, he always was, I think he was drafted with the expectation of being a second best wide receiver, like a speed threat to take off the top of the defense. And so now they finally got a true number one, DeAndre Hopkins. And there's a few receivers the Cardinals also have. Keyshawn Johnson, who the Cardinals apparently absolutely love. And another player no one's talking about is Hakeem Butler. That could make the Cardinals offense absolutely scary. But now you have to consider, since the Arizona Cardinals traded for such a superstar wide receiver, who did they have to give up? Well, in this case, it seems like they didn't give up much. They gave up David Johnson, a second-round pick for this year's draft, and a fourth-round pick for next year's draft in return for DeAndre Hopkins and a fourth-round pick for next year's draft. And I'm just going to say outright, this was highway robbery, because David Johnson, yes, I know people act like he's fallen off a cliff. I definitely don't think he's fallen off a cliff. He's become injury-prone. But the last 2 years haven't been the best, but the year before, 3 years ago, which isn't too far removed, he was having a good year until he got hurt. So he's been a little injury prone, but when he's playing, he plays great. He just didn't fit in this Cliff Kingsbury system. And DeAndre Hopkins will fit in any system. He's spectacular. But considering the Houston side, I could see what they're trying to do somewhat. I think they're trying to match the 49ers roster in terms of the triple-headed monster running back, the big three. But I don't know if they're going to work as well, because I think David Johnson is definitely the best running back, even including San Francisco's running backs. But he's been injury-prone. We don't know how he's going to play. I definitely think it's a high-risk, high-reward, because they gave up a lot. Like DeAndre Hopkins, absolutely a spectacular stud on the offensive end. And they gave him up for someone that might not even play well. But the one thing that could save them is the second-round pick, as the Arizona Cardinals did have the 36th pick that they gave up to acquire DeAndre Hopkins, which wasn't much, because they didn't really give up much, because the 36th pick, yes, that's very valuable, and especially in this draft where it's kind of deep. But David Johnson, the Arizona Cardinals did not have any need for him anymore, because they just re-signed Kenyon Drake to a transition tag, and they're going to see if it plays out better or not. And we're going to see if Kenyon Drake can match what he did in his year, the previous year. But even if he doesn't, they could get a cheap level running back, which I still think Kenyon Drake will step it up. But they basically had Kenyon Drake playing better than David Johnson, and David Johnson was making top-tier money, and they traded him away to the Texans for someone that they actually can use, because they don't need David Johnson, as he doesn't fit as well as Kenyon Drake. So this was highway robbery, because the Texans could have been like, we know you're trying to get rid of David Johnson, because it was pretty much obvious at this point. But they still overpaid for David Johnson and the fact of DeAndre Hopkins. And the thing Houston fans want to say is that, oh, DeAndre Hopkins falling off, look at his numbers. I'm going to read you the numbers. So last year, DeAndre Hopkins had 115 receptions for 1,572 yards, 11 touchdowns, and he only had one drop. And this year, he had 104 receptions, 1,165 receiving yards, and 7 touchdowns. So he did have a drop-off, but that's because he had a slow start, which it happens to the best of us, the best receivers also. But he really picked it up in the second half of the season, which is what matters because it's a more recent timetable to show us how DeAndre Hopkins will play. And also, it will, even if he did fall off a bit, it's not even major. It's very minor fall off. But I don't think there is any drop off. I think it was just a slow start. It was an anomaly. And I think he's just going to pick it right back up. And he was playing great. As in the playoffs, he had a pretty okay game, but that was because he was hurt. But in the first game, not against the Chiefs, but the one against the Bills, he was playing against a top corner, and he had a pretty good game. And he was part of the reason they won. I'm not going to say the main reason because it was Deshaun Watson. By the way, Deshaun Watson is going to be basically screwed because he only has Will Fuller as his weapon and Kenny Stills, which are good weapons, but they're no number ones. Will Fuller is a good number 2, but I definitely don't think he's going to be a number 1. So I'm thinking the Texans will probably, with the second round pick they got from the Cardinals, get someone that might fall to him, maybe like a Henry Ruggs if he can, or maybe even a Justin Jefferson. But we'll see what will happen in the draft. But right now, it's not looking too good for the Houston Texans, as it looks like they got robbed out of a superstar receiver who's quiet, who doesn't start any drama. He's been a quiet man, and he is like a spectacular piece to have on any team. And the Cardinals, with this move, they could be in real playoff contention. Not saying they will make it, but they may be able to, near the end of the season, people are going to be surprised with how close they may be able to win into the playoffs, because they also added 2 extra spots. I know they play in the toughest division, but they also are the Arizona Cardinals with Kyler Murray, DeAndre Hopkins. They got Chandler Jones. They still got Patrick Peterson. And the Arizona Cardinals might, with their first round, they don't have to draft CeeDee Lamb anymore because they just got DeAndre freaking Hopkins. So they're probably going to grab an offensive lineman, or they're going to draft some defensive stud, which is an absolute win. And this could really push the Cardinals into playoff contention. I don't think they're going to win anything special, maybe a game max. And even then, I'm not even confident. I wouldn't bet my money on it, but it would be interesting to see how it shakes up, and Kyler Murray is going to have a really, really good sophomore season, especially after this. I thought he was going to have a great one, but now I think he's going to have the absolutely amazing one. And thanks for watching, guys. Please like and subscribe, and let me know what you guys thought of the trade in the comments below.